forecast tonight, already frayed South Korea-Japan ties are likely to deteriorate even further as Japan lays fresh territorial claim to Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo in its new history textbooks. South Korea vows to step up its air defenses in the wake of North Korea's apparent spy activities using unmanned drones. Plus, the government unveils plans to develop its content industry that includes creating a joint investment fund with China and setting up more high schools for cultivating a skilled workforce. These stories and more next on Arirang News at 8. Good evening and thank you for joining us. It's Friday, April 4th here in Seoul. I am Yuji Hae. We begin this evening with Korea-Japan relations going downhill, defying expectations that the three-way summit last month between Korea, Japan, and the U.S. could lead to better ties between Seoul and Tokyo. Japan has provoked Korea once again. It has bolstered its territorial claims over Korea's Dokdo Island through a textbook revision and diplomatic blue paper. Our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
8 out of 12 textbooks that will be used in Japanese elementary schools starting next spring will falsely state that Korea's Dokdo Island is part of Japan. Of the 8 textbooks approved by the Japanese Education Ministry Friday, 6 say Korea is illegally occupying Dokdo, known as Takeshima in Japanese, while 2 carry maps that mark the island as Japanese territory. Dokdo, which is physically closer to Korea in the body of water that divides the Korean peninsula and Japan, has long been a thorn in bilateral relations. In protest of the textbooks, which make much stronger claims over Dokdo than before, Seoul's foreign ministry summoned the Japanese ambassador to South Korea and warned of further strained ties.
The South Korean government warns that if the Japanese government continues to make unjustified claims on Dokdo through its textbook revisions, it will only further distance the two countries.
On the same day, Japan released its annual diplomatic blue paper, which carries Tokyo's stance on the victims of its wartime sexual enslavement of women. In it, Tokyo says all wartime compensation issues between Japan and South Korea were settled under a 1965 bilateral treaty that normalized diplomatic ties between the two countries. It claims that even though the so-called comfort women were compensated by a government-linked Asian Women's Fund and received apologies from previous prime ministers, Korea continues to demand additional measures from Japan. It says Japan believes the issue should not be turned into a diplomatic feud and that it's putting every effort into resolving the issue. Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military during the Second World War, and many are still waiting for a heartfelt apology from Japan. While Seoul and Tokyo were expected to hold working-level talks on the so-called comfort women issue this month, the chances of such a meeting taking place at this time appear slim. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Amid rampant speculation over U.S. President Barack Obama's Asia tour schedule, the final date of his state visit to Japan is out. Japanese Foreign Minister Kishida confirmed Friday that Japan will host a U.S. leader on April 24th and 25th. After his stay in Tokyo, Obama is expected to travel to Korea for 2 days, followed by other stops in Malaysia and the Philippines. Obama's latest Asia tour comes at a time of strained Seoul-Tokyo ties over Japan's repeated denials of its imperialistic aggressions. In the wake of the recent drone infiltrations by the North, the South Korean military remains on high alert. Arirang News' defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin has more on the latest findings regarding the North's drone technology and how South Korea plans to better protect the country.
South Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwang-jin acknowledged Friday that the military lacks the capability to detect small-sized aircraft like the unmanned area vehicles that were recently found on South Korean soil. The drones, confirmed to be made and developed by North Korea, were not capable of loading explosives. But Kim said that if North Korea were to develop their technology, the regime might be able to load them with explosives or chemical weapons. The defense minister added that North Korea has hundreds of UAVs in its arsenal, and that they are very difficult to detect because they're so small. As such, the South Korean military plans to purchase low-altitude radar systems and other military equipment to prevent an infiltration of Korea's air defense zone. The ministry believes one of the drones, the one found north of Seoul in the city of Paju late last month, malfunctioned and crashed as it was headed back to North Korea. They added that the aircraft had flown at one point over the presidential office for 20 seconds, and a Japanese-made Nikon camera attached to it took around 190 pictures. In a separate development, the ministry says they successfully tested a 500-kilometer ballistic missile on March 23rd. It is capable of hitting any and all strategic targets in North Korea, including key nuclear and military facilities. This missile can hold up to 1 ton of explosives and is expected to be included in South Korea's combat arrangements starting next year. The South Korean military currently has missiles with a range of 300 kilometers that can hold 500 kilograms of explosives in its arsenal. So this successful test represents an upgrade. The ministry says the focus now turns to developing a ballistic missile with a range of 800 kilometers, which can hold up to 500 kilograms of warhead. This will allow the South Korean military to hit any target in the north from anywhere in the country. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And the North Korean drones found in the south in recent weeks were also the hot topic at Seoul's National Assembly. It was day 2 of the parliamentary interpellation session on this Friday, where the rival parties clashed over a possible gap in national security. Our political correspondent Kim Hyun-gil reports.
Rival party lawmakers expressed concerns about the nation's air defense system at Friday's assembly session. They raised questions about why the government was not prepared for an infiltration of North Korean drones.
Security is vital for national interest. How well prepared are we for such unprecedented intrusions by the communist state?
We are considering buying a radar system that can detect low-flying objects. We are working with the Defense Ministry to devise a series of measures to bolster our air defense system.
Lawmakers of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy honed in on the alarming fact that an unmanned aircraft found in Paju, Gyeonggi-do province flew over the presidential compound last month and snapped dozens of pictures. They raised concerns that the drones could be used to carry out attacks.
I think South Korea has a serious security dilemma. We must not neglect the fact that the drones could be loaded with bombs or chemical weapons.
The unmanned aerial vehicles are rudimentary spy drones, but Pyongyang may develop more advanced drones for attacks in the future. We are drawing up measures.
The opposition lawmakers also grilled cabinet ministers over whether Seoul was prepared to counter a future nuclear test by Pyongyang. They urged the government to hold bilateral summit talks between South and North Korea. Prime Minister Chung said if Pyongyang does conduct a 4th nuclear test, the government will work with the UN Security Council to slap harsher sanctions on the Kim Jong-un regime. On Monday, the National Assembly will resume the interpellation session with a focus on the economy. Follow-up measures to the nation's biggest ever personal data leak earlier this year are expected to dominate the discussions. Kim Hyun-gil, Arirang News.
The cargo ship carrying 16 North Koreans sunk off the southern coast of South Korea early Friday morning, killing at least 2 people. The 4,300-ton cargo ship that was en route to China from the North Korean city of Cheongjin carrying iron and ore sent in an emergency distress call shortly after 1 a.m. local time after encountering trouble. The 3 people were rescued and taken to the hospital, while the bodies of the 2 crew members have been recovered. 11 still remain unaccounted for. The cause of the accident has yet to be identified.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Yoo Ji-hye for a lively half-hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on Arirang TV.
Move aimed at fostering startups is part of the government's 3-year economic innovation. In line with President Park Geun-hye's push to foster Korea's contents industry, which she called the key to future economic growth, a package of measures has been unveiled, from creating a joint investment fund with China to supporting contents-related startups. Our Park Ji-won has more.
Korea's contents industry, which is made up of a diverse set of sub-areas, such as films, music, games, and comics, has grown rapidly over the past few years. Between 2008 and last year, the industry has posted annual average growth of 7.5%. To further induce growth, the Presidential Committee for Cultural Enrichment reported to President Park Friday a total of 48 measures to boost the content industry. The measures, which span from financial support to doing away with unfair practices, aim to achieve annual revenue in excess of $110 billion and an annual export volume of some $10 billion by 2017. One of the main initiatives is to raise a government fund of about $47 million. This will be used to invest in small content production companies with an annual revenue of less than $1 million. About 90% of all content-related companies in Korea fall into this category. Korea and China will also raise a joint fund of about $190 million for the co-production of films by both countries. The money comes from the public and private sectors, and the government expects the deal will make it easier for Korean film talents to crack the Chinese market. As the Presidential Committee consists of dozens of key cultural leaders in Korea, including the nation's culture and future ministers, the measures were drawn up through cooperation between related government bodies such as the Culture, Future and Science, and Education ministries.
The contents industry is an essential sector that can help us realize our vision of cultural enrichment, a creative economy, and a happy society. As the industry has a great ripple effect on the rest of the economy, the government has designated it as a promising service industry. So we plan to support it with a variety of measures.
The government will also provide office space to creative young people who want to start their own businesses in the industry. It plans to support more than 400 new businesses by 2017. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics isn't just raking in the money from sales of its smartphones, they're also scooping up U.S. patents at a rapid pace. Our Kwon So-ah has more on the strategic plan.
The number of patents owned by Samsung Electronics in the United States has increased 1.5 times in just 4 years. That's according to the Financial Supervisory Services Data Analysis Retrieval and Transfer System on Friday. Samsung had around 22,000 patents in 2009, which grew to 34,000 last year. 4,000 to 5,000 new patent applications every year made the rise possible. The company says the focus on U.S. patents is especially important considering the ongoing patent disputes they are currently engaged in, particularly with Apple. Samsung is second in applying for patents in the U.S. after IBM. In fact, Samsung filed more patent requests in the U.S. last year than it did here in Korea. If the trend continues, Samsung will own more U.S. patents than Korean ones in 1 or 2 years. The company is also expanding its patents in Europe, China, and Japan. The increase in investment costs for research and development is also noticeable since it is directly connected with intellectual property rights. Experts say Apple is the main reason for Samsung's efforts as the two tech giants remain locked in a fierce patent war. Samsung is currently embroiled in another patent trial in a California court where Apple is seeking $2 billion in damages from its Korean rival. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The sales of imported cars in Korea hit a record high last month with aggressive promotional campaigns and an introduction of some new models. The Korea Automobile Importers and Distributors Association said Friday that more than 15,000 new foreign-made cars rolled off lots in March. That's up more than 30% from the same period a year earlier. German luxury car brand BMW sold the most cars, followed by Mercedes-Benz and Audi. The number of households turning to a life of farming hit an all-time high in Korea last year, and a growing number of these city slickers turned farmers are in their 20s and 30s. So why are they flocking to the countryside, and how are they preparing themselves for the transition? Connie Kim asked him.
People are busily carrying fertilizer, shovels, and seed, all tools and ingredients for the season's first outdoor agricultural session. It was once only older adults enrolling in this farming school, but then college students began showing up.
Getting to experience farming, I got to learn more about agriculture and want to live away from the city in the future.
These types of sessions are also held indoors with participants learning how to cultivate land. The Agriculture Ministry says farmers in their 20s and 30s increased more than 16-fold in 2013 from 10 years ago, accounting for more than 1/6 of the total households that have moved to the suburbs. The organization attributes the rise to government policies and subsidies that encourage younger people to take up farming.
It's a social trend. Korea's past economic growth was spurred by conglomerates, but now it has slowed down. The younger generation is now viewing agriculture as the new blue ocean.
And experts say younger adults have turned into social entrepreneurs who are pursuing their own goals and trying to resolve social problems. In the southern county of Hongsong, a group of farmers are picking various freshly grown vegetables such as broccoli, celery, and lettuce. Cho Dae-sung is one of many who moved to Hongsong 3 years ago, transitioning from an art gallery employee to a full-time farmer. Already interested in what he was eating daily, Cho decided to move to the countryside to start living in an eco-friendly way.
A successful settlement in the countryside isn't just about earning money from farming. It's also about being accepted into the society by its members.
The suburb is closely knitted by who you know, where you grew up. Once you start to get along with them, you can get crucial information about which vegetables to harvest and what kind of land you should do farming on, which is the key to a so-called successful settlement.
Connie Kim, Arirang News.
It's time for In the Press, where we look at some of the hot issues of the week that have captured the attention of the domestic media. From the early arrival of blooming spring to a smart patch that fights Parkinson's disease, our Yudian has the details. Leon.
Happy Friday, everyone. We're not just wrapping up the first week of April, but also the first week where many of us here in Korea enjoyed some early signs of spring. Now, the story from 중앙일보 has a headline that reads, "Quickly blooming azaleas and cherry blossoms. Flowers are not the guilty ones, but the people." Let's take a quick look at the photos below. You see forsythias, azaleas, and cherry blossoms, all of which, according to the article, bloomed earlier this year by up to 13 days. Now, you also see that swallows and cabbage butterflies were spotted much earlier as well. And the article says this is all possibly due to something called the urban heat island effect here in Seoul. Now, this is where tall buildings absorb and trap heat, causing higher temperatures. It's nice to put the winter cold behind us, but the environmental impact we humans are having on our communities is something we should not forget. Next, moving on to the top news item in this week's papers, the discovery of a crashed North Korean drone that was found to have taken dozens of photos of Seoul, including South Korea's presidential office. Now, these are photos from the front page of the daily Gyeonghang Shinmun, and the one on the left is of the presidential office taken by the North Korean drone. And this right over here is the presidential office. Now, on the right is the same shot taken from Google Earth. Now, so if the North Koreans could have easily gotten the same glimpse of the presidential office through Google Earth, should we be worried about a drone flying over it? Now, that's a debate being had. As reported by Kim Hyun-bin earlier in the newscast, South Korea's defense ministry said the drone was not capable of loading explosives, but some say there's still a cause for concern. For more, let's go on over to this next daily from 동아일보, which covers the same story. And it has a headline right over here that reads, "North Korean drone used to verify Google coordinates." So by comparing the coordinates from the photos taken by their drone and the Google Earth images, a military official says North Korea could see whether the exact coordinates match up to find out, for example, the exact location of the president's office in Cheongwade. In that case, it could send a suicide bomber plane to pinpoint and strike a specific target. So the drone itself is not so threatening, but the purpose for which it could be used is. Moving on now, you may be familiar with nicotine patches that help you quit smoking, but what about a patch to fight Parkinson's disease? The headline here from 조선일보 reads, "The smart patch that diagnoses and treats Parkinson's disease to come out." Now, this adhesive patch, developed by a team of local researchers from Seoul University, can monitor the patient's muscle movements, including tremors related to Parkinson's, in real time and decide whether it requires medication. Now, if it decides it's time, the right dose will automatically be injected via the skin, according to the article. Now, the paper on this latest technology has been published in the prestigious scientific journal, The Nature Nanotechnology. We're now seeing wearable technology quickly venturing into the medical field. I'll leave it at that for this week's look at the stories from the Korean papers.
Let's check on some of the stories making headlines on the global front. From Russia, yet again, tightening pressure on Ukraine, to Turkey lifting its ban on Twitter. We go live to our Paul Lee at the News Center. Paul, let's start with Russia's gas hike on Ukraine. Just how much of an increase are we talking about?
An 80% hike, GA. The latest increase is the second in just 3 days, and it represents a huge burden for the Ukrainian economy, which is on the brink of bankruptcy.
Firstly, the price of $468 is absolutely unacceptable. Secondly, the Russian Federation completely understands this. Thirdly, there are no reasons for Russia to increase the gas price to Ukraine from $260 to $460, except one reason.
Ukraine currently meets about half of its total gas needs from Russian supplies, and fears are growing that Moscow might cut off gas deliveries completely.
I see. Well, moving now to Afghanistan, where presidential elections kick off on Saturday. Paul, how significant is this poll?
Well, it marks the first democratic transfer of power from one president to another in Afghanistan's history. The election also comes at a critical time, as most foreign troops are preparing to pull out of the country after 13 years of struggling to quell a violent insurgency.
The significant participation of our people in this election will be the biggest guarantee of the continuation of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Strong participation will be the greatest response to those who believe violence and destruction will act as a deterrent against our people.
The Taliban, overthrown in 2001, has warned of attacks at voting centers. This Wednesday, the Interior Ministry was hit with a series of suicide bombings.
And Paul, lastly, let's move now to Turkey, where the government has unblocked Twitter. What can you tell us?
That's right, GA. Turkey's telecom authority lifted a 2-week ban on Twitter on Thursday after its constitutional court ruled 1 day earlier that the ban was a violation of the right to free expression.
I believe unblocking Twitter is a positive step for Turkey, and this was a step that people who stand up for freedom were waiting for. They unblocked it. Thanks to the rule of law, we can access Twitter again.
Twitter was banned on March 21st ahead of important local elections after audio recordings alleging corruption among the Prime Minister's officials was posted online. Meanwhile, Google's video sharing website YouTube remains offline. GA?
All right, Paul, thank you very much for the report. We'll see you back in just about 2 hours. The temperatures took a dip today after yesterday's showers, but that hasn't stopped people from visiting the annual Spring Flower Festival taking place near the Hangang River. And for more, we connect live to our Kim Bo-kyung, who is standing by at Yunjungno in Yeouido. Hello there, Bo-kyung. I see lots of cherry blossoms behind you. How's the atmosphere
the plentiful
there?
cherry blossoms out here definitely makes it feel as though you're in a fairy tale. However, Mother Nature is not fully on our side. It's currently about 7 degrees out here, but the wind chills make it feel a couple of degrees colder than that. So if you're headed out for a late night trip, please be sure to dress warmly. But despite the cold snap, many are out here with family and friends making the most out of this gorgeous, gorgeous scenery. The Spring Flower Festival will continue through April 13th here at Yeouiseodo, or better known as Yunjungno. So if you haven't made plans for the weekend already, you should definitely consider coming out. As for tomorrow's weather, the southern and eastern coastal regions may get about 5 millimeters of precipitation, which could be accompanied with storm. Otherwise, tomorrow will be another chilly day and temperatures will jump back to the seasonal average range on Sunday. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul and Gwangju make it to the low teens, while Daegu and Busan hit the mid-teens. Other regions such as Daejeon and Jeju make it to 12 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang top out at 8 and 0. Hope you make some time to come on out to check out the wonderful cherry blossoms. That's all from me here at the 10th Hangang Yeouido Cherry Blossom Festival, and back to you, Jihae, at the studio.
They look fantastic. Thank you very much for that update. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul. I'll be back with more news updates on our primetime news at 10 p.m. Korea time. See you then.